So some of you haven't even changed a seat. That's great. Fantastic. Glad to have you here. My name is Mary Catherine Morn, and I am the Director of Stewardship and Development for our UUA. It's a privilege to do this work and really a joy to have these conversations this GA. What we've done is we've pulled together a track of 4 workshops we're calling Wisdom and Generosity. The Wisdom Path is a wonderful curriculum developed by our UUA with some partners about our relationship with money. It's available online. I hope you'll have a look. We're actually going to be curating those materials in some different ways in the next couple of years to make it more accessible for more people. But in the spirit of that, of making stewardship education and engagement more accessible to more people, we're offering these 4 workshops. You are in the second of our workshops. We just had a great time with a guest from the Texas Methodist Foundation, who is a vice president for ministerial leadership with them and does fantastic stewardship work. It was a delight to start with her. This afternoon, we're doing a flash workshop where a number of us are going to share flash ideas, our best fundraising ideas. Tomorrow, I hope you have tomorrow marked because our core workshops are tomorrow. The first one at 3 being the annual giving campaign, and the one immediately following that, and all of these are in this room. The one immediately following that is creative fundraising, including things like capital campaigns and Faithify. You'll learn about Faithify at that workshop. So we hope that you will join us when you are able, and we are so glad to have you as partners in this conversation. We hear again and again from our congregations and our leaders how important it is that we talk about money and how we're not doing it well enough and how we need more resources. And so we're trying to pull together resources that will be useful. We really welcome your feedback about it. At the end of the slideshow, there will be a slide with some contact information on it. So write that down. I'll tell you, to reach us at the UUA, you just have to write development at uua.org. I'm looking. Is that right? And that will get to us. So that's a resource for you. Also, lots of resources on our webpage, but we want to jump right in. I want to say a word about, actually, I'm going to start us with a poem before I say a word about anything else. To set a tone in the spirit of miracles. Because often we have that sense that gathering the resources we need to do the really important work that we're called to do sometimes does feel like a miracle. This is a poem by one of my favorite poets, the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska, and this one is called Miracle Fair. Commonplace miracle, that so many commonplace miracles happen. An ordinary miracle. In the dead of night, the barking of invisible dogs. One miracle out of many, a small, airy cloud, yet it can block a large and heavy moon. Several miracles in one, an alder tree reflected in the water, and that it's backwards, left to right, and that it grows there, crown down, and never reaches the bottom, even though the water is shallow. An everyday miracle. Winds weak to moderate, turning gusty in storms. First among equal miracles, cows are cows. Second to none, just this orchard from just this seed. A miracle without a cape or a top hat, scattering white doves. A miracle for what else could you call it? Today, the sun rose at 3:14 and will set at 8:01. A miracle, less surprising than it should be. Even though the hand has fewer than 6 fingers, it still has more than 4. A miracle. Just take a look around. The world is everywhere. An additional miracle, as everything is additional. The unthinkable is thinkable. I'm going to begin with a little story. It's not really, most of what you'll be hearing today ideas, concrete, specific ideas for fundraising. Some are projects, some are dinners, lots of different things. And we hope that it will inspire you. And we hope at the end there might be a couple that we'll have time to share from all of you. I want to start with a little perspective about giving and fundraising, and one of the real foundational pieces from my point of view about fundraising, and it's about giving. And that is that if you want to do some fundraising, if you want to participate in fundraising, if you want to help your congregation with fundraising, then I hope you're a giver. I hope you give. If you are not an active and engaged giver, I hope that you will pass and let someone else take this work, and you do your own work on what it means to you to be a giver. I was inspired this year by a dear friend and colleague of mine who has a very dramatic and radical perspective on being a giver that many of us probably don't engage with, but that sold me completely on tithing. My friend Don Southworth is a tither. And his story of growing to be a tither was a great inspiration to me and has put me on track. My husband and I try to give very generously. We talk about what we're giving, but our presenter in the last workshop made a real point about saying we need to plan how we're giving. And I have come to believe that deeply, that giving really is a spiritual discipline. And like any other discipline, it can't just be something we do offhanded when we're inspired by this or that. That we need to have a sense in our own life about what does it mean for us to be a generous person financially, and how are we going to give. So Don's story of being a tither is that he was inspired at a church service to become a tither when he and his wife were both out of work. That situation changed kind of fast, but for a number of years in their life, they were living on very little. He said, but it wasn't hard because we decided what we were going to do is we were going to tithe everything we had after we paid for rent and food. So they gave 10% of that amount. And he said, and through the years, gradually, they moved to giving 10% of more and more. And he said, and actually it didn't take them as long as he thought it would. And now it is a discipline they have in their life that they give 10% of everything they earn. If you need to do the calculation on net and gross, go ahead. But in the spirit of the tithe, I would say that's a wonderful aspiration. The discipline of deciding for yourself, and if you're partnered, if you have others who need to be considered in that, to decide together what you're going to give, I believe is liberating, and it creates more of a sense of abundance. That is what has happened in my life. And so my flash idea for fundraising is, first of all, don't be a fundraiser if you're not giving money. And to make a plan in your life about how you want to give and to be disciplined in your giving. Say the number of the workshop. What is it?
I don't know what it is. Do you?
We'll find it.
Okay. While they're finding the number of the workshop so that you can orient yourself to where you are, this is workshop number 358.
Thank you, Andrea.
In case you need to be somewhere else, now you know that you don't want to leave. It's for the tape. My name is Vale Weller, and I'm the Congregational Giving Director at RUUA, and I'm thrilled to see longtime friends and some new ones here in the room. One of the most fun ideas I heard about fundraising this year came from the First Religious Society of Newburyport. Is anyone in the room from that congregation? Come on up. No, I'm kidding. But if you have anything to add about what I'm going to say, let me know. But what they did was, well, first of all, I hear a lot about how congregations are looking for ways to raise money from not only within the congregation, but from outside. How can we get some of other people's money, is the way it's often said to me. So this idea, the raffle, it was a raffle drawing, and each ticket cost $20 for one ticket. The winner of the raffle would receive dinner anywhere in the world. And so the winner of the raffle would get 2 round-trip tickets and a dinner for 2, not including the alcohol, at any restaurant they choose in the world. So they sold over $40,000 worth of tickets, and you can imagine that that well covers the round-trip fare and cost of the dinner, for 2. But they, of course, I bought one immediately from the consultant that I was meeting with, who, so did you, Cam. We were together. We both bought the tickets because it's just such a fun thing to imagine winning, even though I'm not from that congregation. The person who won last year, of course, went to Paris. And this year it was actually someone from within the congregation who won. Is there anything that you think that I should add about it? No. Successful 2 years in a row. They did point out that they can't do it every single year over and over and over again. You have to take a break from something, even when it's a successful model, to rebuild up the excitement again. But I just thought that was such a fun idea. And certainly I have concerns about the earth and climate change as well. So, you could choose to not go to Africa. I'm just pointing out it's possible. But I just thought that was a neat idea and one worth sharing.
Thank you. Who's next? And I want to say thank you to Amy. We asked for ideas from folks outside of our team, and we got just a couple. So we're really glad to have Reverend Amy Shaw with us.
All right. And I am going to start off by making you work a little. I am going to ask you the same question that I posed to my congregation about 3 years ago. And I will be shocked if anybody says yes, but I've been surprised before. Is there anyone in this room who once a year, and only once a year, gets all of your bills out, lays them on the table, gathers your family together, and says, "Here we have it. This is what we need to spend next year. So, you, my beloved spouse, what can you kick in? And you, my children, what do you got?" And so if we recognize immediately that, of course, we wouldn't do this at home. It's dangerous, it's unbalanced, there's no way. You immediately say, well, how do I know now what I will need next September? You wouldn't do it at home. So why does it sound like a great idea to do it at church? So this 10 minutes is called Succeeding at Year-Round Pledging, Inspiring Generosity in One Easy Year, preceded by a whole bunch of planning and meetings. If anyone tells you you can do this in 1 year, chase them away. The serious question of why to go to year-round pledging, and I mean true year-round pledging, where people are doing their pledges at various points throughout the year, not where you just hold pledging meetings throughout the year and aggravate everyone for 10 months and then take pledges once a year. You want to remove the pledge drive, remove cold calling and financial visits. When I talked to my folks, we started a year's worth of appreciative inquiry and listening sessions to find out, what do you hate? What do you love? And one of the number one things that everyone hated, I don't want to cold call anyone. I don't want anyone cold calling me. I don't want to deal with a month worth of hoorah, let's everyone put on costumes and wave signs and yell, let's have a pledge drive. I don't mind talking about pledging strongly for 1 month because we want to talk about generosity and giving as spiritual practice. But that's church. This is business and church. We wanted to increase financial transparency. We wanted you to have access through the 10 major months of the year. We take summers off. We wanted you to have access. We wanted to increase members' ongoing relationship with the finances. You've got to take the fetishization. We don't want money to be a fetish. This isn't something weird and different. It's part of the life of our church, just like your bills are part of your life. We wanted to increase small group meetings where you could meet with 20 other people, not 150, to try to ask questions about the budget and the billing. And we wanted to decrease financial peaks and troughs. Our goal was to get almost everyone on year-round automatic withdrawal, automatic payments, do it online if we could, if not, just to get everyone in the habit of pay your monthly bills. This is just part of your billing. So the timing. The year before, a full year before you are thinking about trying this, we started those listening sessions. What are we good at? What do we hate? What do we love? How do we pay our own bills at home? To try to get an idea of what the style is for your culture, your congregation, and your area. We made sure people understood our current system so that no one was saying, I don't get enough information when the information was available. We did teaching sessions about what it meant to go to year-round stewardship, that it truly would be breaking the church body into 10 separate groups for the 10 months we actively did meetings, and you would be assigned a month. That's your pledge month. It might be August, September, October, November, anything but June and July. That would be your month. We gathered together our stewardship volunteers and asked them to commit to a 2-year term, not a 1-year. Because this is a lot of work. You don't want this to turn over right when folks are getting used to people. And we did normal pledging that first year in April, just like always, so that we had lots and lots of time to prep. We also met with other groups, surprising groups. We met with membership to talk about who our members were, to make sure we understood everybody's perspective. The second year, we launched with a large kickoff. Really big, wine and cheese, celebrate, and we said, we're getting ready to do it, it's going to hit. And what we launched was monthly small group meetings. You are invited to a meeting. It's about 45 minutes. We bring in what our bills were in the last month, what we project them to be in the coming month. So it's actual physical information, just like you have at home when you're paying your bills. And we say to people, this is where your money is going. And we say to them, hey, at times, we need more money. We know here's what your pledge was this last time, but here's what we have coming up. Can we talk to you about upping? Can we talk to you about doing something different? It lets us stay very, very flexible. At the end of May, we did an evaluation. How did the process go? How did people feel about it? And we asked every group, how did this feel for you? How does this work? What questions did you want to ask and you didn't get time to ask? The important parts of this: do your research. Know who your folks are. We tweaked the groups just a little. The first group, which launched in August, were our strongest supporters and cheerleaders. The people who truly loved this idea, understood it, and were willing to be vocal if someone was saying, I don't get this. Not to push it, not to convince them, but to be able to say to them, I do get it. What questions can I help you with? So that first group or even the first two groups are important. You may need to run multiple groups in a month. For about 150 people, you can run a 10 or 20 person group. The bigger you get, you may need to run two separate groups with two separate sets of team leaders. Be very flexible. You get assigned a month. We broke the whole church out. We let everybody know, here's your month. But you can come earlier. You can come repeatedly. If you have questions every month about what's going on with the billing, absolutely, you come every month. It is your church. You deserve to know what your money is doing. And we are going to talk with you every month about what our needs are, where our money is going, and if we've got more than enough, what we're dreaming about now, what we're gearing toward. And we're going to ask you, what are you dreaming about? Record keeping, absolutely essential. You have to track who's come and who needs to come. And utter transparency. Every person in our church has the ability to know where the money is going, where it is coming, what is happening. Who's coming to meetings? We keep a list so you can look at what the attendance was at any meetings. You can check which ones you've come to. Meetings, we do treasurer's report, we do wish list, we do a Q&A, we pass out the pledge cards, and we give you a budget breakdown. Biggest question we had asked is, oh my God, how do we figure out how many pledges? What have we got? What is our budget? This is terrifying. And I said, yep. But here's the reality. When you do your budgets on once a year pledging, how many of your congregations do you do things like, well, we discount the total pledge number by 8.2% because nobody ever, right. So you know this. We said, you know what? We discount by 5. We discount by 10%. We discount by 8.7. And the reality is anybody at any time could say, you know what, I'm out of money. Or anybody at any time could say, you know what, Grammy just left me $1 million and I love you. I am giving you half of it. So what we do is this. We look at the snapshot of June and July. The 2 months a year that we are not doing an ask, that no group is scheduled. Because everybody, by June and July, everybody has pledged. We've got people that are due to repledge in August, but it gives us a snapshot. By taking June and July times 6, we have a rough annual pledge amount. And it's about as close, let's face it, as the guesswork we do about how much to discount the yearly pledging. So we've asked people to commit to 3 years up front of trying this. And so far it's working. We are in a surplus budget this year. This was our first year of going 2 year round, which means I just got my very first raise ever. We are paying our staff at fair compensation levels. And we are adding programs. So, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. And thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cam Archibald, Stewardship and Events Assistant Director at the UUA, and I'm going to share a little bit about one of our most successful fundraising events and some of the concepts that that event illustrates, because we all know event fundraising can be really hard. It's a lot of work, and sometimes the return can be mixed. So I'm hoping you can take a couple of ideas away from this. So we tried something really big. And some of you who were at the Providence General Assembly a couple of years ago will remember that we hosted our Brave Souls UU's Pledge Over the Edge repelling fundraiser. So
It was not my idea.
No, but that's actually part of the story is the idea. So our former director, thank you for the prompt, Mary Catherine. Our former director of development before Mary Catherine was the Reverend Terry Sweetser, who years before had said he read in some fundraising magazine about this repelling fundraiser, and we said, that's crazy, no way. But then several years after that, he announced his retirement, and we wanted to do something really special to honor him. And I remembered this thing he had suggested, and I said, let's try it. Let's see how we can take a huge idea of having people rappel off a building and turn it into a fundraiser. And so we contracted with a company called Over the Edge, who often runs walkathon style event fundraisers, but that wasn't going to work for us. So we created our own format for the fundraising, and worked with through a combination of gifts that I'll get to in a minute. But the main part of the fundraiser was that it was something new. It was something big. It was going to capture people's imagination. We had a lot of raised eyebrows. There were a lot of questions at first, but the goal was to get people excited and interested in doing something really new and really unique. So with that concept, I encourage all of you to try something new with your event fundraising. You may have an auction every year. You may have a pancake breakfast. You can do all of those things, but maybe try a new theme for them, or just twist it a little bit so it's bigger, so there's something special that people can grab onto and can capture their imagination a little bit. And as I said, one of the other goals of this fundraiser was to honor someone special. So featuring Terry Sweetser as the inspiration behind this fundraiser was really a great way to have conversations with our donors about contributing to this fundraiser. Terry Sweetser is a friend of many and a wonderful fundraiser himself. So many people wanted to do something to honor him on the occasion of his retirement. So I suggest that you find, as many of you do in your events, but it's really effective to find someone special that a lot of people in your community or your congregation care about, and have them be one of the figureheads or the honoree or recipient of some sort of award at an event, and utilize their networks in terms of building donations and building attendance to the event. And now to get to how we actually did the fundraising part, swapping slides here. We allowed people to give in a few different ways. The first thing we did was connect with a lot of our major donors, especially those who were closely connected with Terry Sweetser, and told them about this major idea that we wanted him to feel really special, that we wanted to try something new, and asked a significant number of our major donors to be the lead sponsors of this event. And you can do the same thing with any of your events, including your auctions, and that's something I really recommend, is talking to the people who you know are committed givers in your congregation and having them commit to bidding high on a certain auction item, or if you have a paddle raiser or fill the bucket type of auction, having somebody. So a paddle raiser, sure. So one fun type of auction piece is having people all contribute towards one cause or event or capital project rather than receiving an item in an auction. Everyone will be just bidding to contribute to this fund. So we did this one year to name a room in the UUA headquarters, and we have major donors say, we want to raise $100,000. Major donors have committed $20,000, and then we have another donor saying, I'll give $10,000, $5,000, $10,000, and by the time we get down to maybe the $500 range, everyone in the room feels like, wow, look at what all the rest of these people have done. I want to raise my hand at the $25 level. I want to be part of this, because everyone in the room has a chance to make a gift to this project that we're working on. So my main point here is, with events, just like with your capital campaign, just like with your annual drive, you need to talk to people in advance about their pledges. And the 80-20 rule still does apply in terms of the majority of your funds at an event will come from a smaller number of people. And hopefully that will help inspire others to make gifts, knowing that larger donors have contributed and that this is really important cause to them will make it easy for everyone to feel like this is something that they can participate in. And one more thing about that is that we also allowed a lot of room for creativity in fundraising during this rappelling event. These two women who are my colleagues at the UUA, the day before they rappelled down the building, they walked around General Assembly and had people sign their T-shirts and give them $20. And so they raised several $1,000s by asking friends and strangers around General Assembly to sponsor their rappel. And so that was a fun way that they were able to connect and tell more people about the event and tell people to come and watch the big celebration the following day. So that was a lot of fun. And then finally, one more piece that wasn't fundraising related, but was more friend raising and morale raising, is that we wanted everyone at GA to be able to be included in this, whether or not they were interested or able to make a financial donation. We encourage people to make brave pledges in addition to financial pledges. And so we had people write on this board and send in messages online of what they were going to do in the coming year to be generous in their own communities or their congregation. So they were setting an intention to bring more generosity into our faith community or into their own home communities, because that's something that Terry Sweetser had always preaches, is the importance of just growing generosity and growing the strength of Unitarian Universalism. So it wasn't just about the dollar amount, but about building a culture of generosity among all of the UUA. So in the end, we had 80 people rappel down the side of the Providence Convention Center, and everyone had a great time. It was a beautiful day, and our total fundraising was $500,000. And so we were so grateful to the major donors who contributed, as well as to the people who were just walking by, were thrilled about this idea and gave us $10 at a time. So it was a lot of fun, and I hope it inspires you to be bold and try something new in your own events. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Reverend Darcy Roque. I work in Stewardship and Development. I'm a donor programs manager, and I bring tidings from Felicia Orth, who's a congregant in Los Alamos, New Mexico. And this was something that she shared with me and that I wanted to share with all of you. She's very proud of this, and I think as she should be. So she's been a member of several different congregations. And this specific event, which, again, kind of goes along the theme of what Vail was talking about, is very specific. So it might not be used all the time, but is really fun and successful and interesting. And it worked at her church in Santa Fe when she was a member, in Houston before that, and then most recently in Los Alamos, New Mexico. So this was the end of a capital campaign. And anyone who has been part of a capital campaign of a congregation might know that your congregants, and as congregants, you might love your minister and your church, and as a minister, you might love your congregants, and at the end of the capital campaign, you might also be a little tired of fundraising, and that can be hard. And so what happened in Los Alamos was they had done a wonderful job. They have a new sanctuary, actually, but they didn't have the resources for any furnishings. So at that point, they had none of those resources. So this was a very specific instance, what I'm going to be talking about, but I challenge you to think creatively about how this might work in your congregation. So what they did was something called a reverse auction. So they had a booklet, and I'm going to be showing you a few pictures from the booklet that was shown. They had their church service, and then it is New Mexico, so they had green chili chicken soup lunch, which was wonderful. They had auction paddles that were simply white paper plates with markers on them. And what they did was they showed pictures at all different price points, and that was really important too. All different price points and across all different programs for kids, adult, music, hospitality, etc., of what could be in the sanctuary. So what they were aspiring to buy. Now, some of this came up, as you can see. You have woven UU tapestry or folding chairs. But what they did was they also made it really personal. So for each auction item They had assistants coming up and sometimes showing big pictures of them. But also it was about imagination. So some of it was humor. Apparently there was a joke about the minister loves tuna sandwiches, and so when they had the refrigerator, they would talk about the importance of the refrigerator, so they didn't leave the tuna sandwiches out. But also some of it was about, I'm going to go to the end here, this is pretty long, but the Little Tykes Turtle Sandbox. So it's also just imagining the community that you're going to be creating for young people in your congregation, and what that means as they grow up, as this becomes another home. So it's really about sort of the imaginative aspects of this. And so I thought it was a really wonderful idea. They raised $17,000 in about 2.5 hours. And some of that was also, as Cam says, some of it they worked with individuals to get bids ahead of time. So they did, and it would come out as breaking news. So in the middle of the auction, somebody would run out and say, breaking news, this refrigerator has already been bought, and everybody would start cheering. But also it gave everybody a chance to feel like they also were a part of bringing joy to their community. So there were price points where everyone felt you can buy a hymnal, you could buy a little piece, so that every time you walked into that sanctuary as well, you felt that there was also a piece of you there that helped create and build this whole community. So I think that was also a wonderful piece of that. And so that's the reverse auction.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Randall. I am your Legacy Gifts Manager at our UUA, which means I help both individuals and congregations with their planned giving. And in past lives, I've also been a hospice chaplain, and I'm a trained OWL facilitator, so I often like to say I have the holy trifecta of sex, death, and money in my professional portfolio. But I do have a lot of passion around helping people talk about both their legacies financially and spiritually here in this world, and becoming more comfortable talking about death. So talking to people about planned giving, Darcy, you have a lot of slides up here. We're going to work through Darcy's.
Go past the turtle.
Go and pass the turtle. There's mine. Okay. Linking ministry, education, and planned giving is a passion of mine. So I'm calling this little flash presentation, Eat, Drink, Discuss Your Mortality. So when people talk about planned giving, it's often talked about as estate planning. And lots of congregations have estate planning seminars, and they invite people to come learn about how they can put a bequest to the congregation in their will. And they'll say, come to our estate planning seminar. And this is what people think. Discussing estate planning is basically just sitting there with a big Grim Reaper in your midst. Because really you're inviting people to talk about their deaths, which are on the horizon. That horizon might be a ways away, but they're on the horizon. And so people don't really come to estate planning seminars because this is the image they have in mind. So I had a thought of what if we could actually embrace that? Because if we can't talk about our mortality in our congregations, where on earth can we talk about it? Thank you for the amen. So I was looking for models where communities do come together to just talk about death, not specifics of my death necessarily or yours, but death in general, and is there a good model out there? And I came across something called Death Cafe. Maybe some of you have heard of Death Cafe. Death Cafe is this model where people, strangers, gather to eat cake, drink tea, sometimes alcoholic beverages, and discuss death. And they're very simple, and their only real motivation is to increase awareness of death with the view of helping people make the most of their finite lives. So really, you're talking about death to live a better life. And I really liked this. And that's actually where I got that motto of eat, drink, discuss your mortality, because that's behind Death Cafe. And their model was it's free, anyone can host it, you can go on their website and learn a bit about seed questions to get people talking, how to host one in your community. I put the website there if you're interested in learning more about Death Cafe. So I borrowed Death Cafe's idea, and I worked with the congregation that I'm the community minister at, the Unitarian Universalist Area Church at First Parish in Sherborn, Massachusetts. Oh my God. Raise your hand if your congregation has a longer name than that. They're out there. And so we started working on the UUAC's Death Cafe. And we came up with this model of 4 sessions that were going to link ministry, education, and stewardship with the goal of relieving anxiety around issues of death and dying by providing both spiritual and practical tools, thereby helping people live their lives to their fullest, aligned with their values, right up until the end. So we had these 4 sessions, and at all 4 sessions we were going to have all of the ministry team at the church, because we knew that these conversations, which were going to be both personal, history telling, spiritual conversations, and very practical conversations, were all going to be very pastoral in nature. So I was there leading as the community minister, our senior minister was there, our assistant minister, our intern minister. The whole ministry team was on board with this. So session 1 was getting to know our mortal selves, and that was often what we do in first sessions, creating covenant and sharing expectations around confidentiality. And then we had people pair up and share their personal experiences around death. And it might be any deaths they've experienced in their life. Some people talked about issues with aging parents and also their own concerns with their own mortality. Session 2 was called Dying as a Social Activity. And this was about starting the conversation with loved ones of how do we even broach this really important topic that we so rarely talk about with the people we love, about what matters to me most and how I'd like my death to go. In this, we talked about the practicalities of advance directives, what they were and how you could create them. We touched on anticipatory grief and the emotional work of dying and preparing to do that both for our loved ones and for ourselves. And we touched upon hospice, what it is, what it isn't, and what it means. Session 3 was more practical preparations and beyond. We talked about healthcare proxies, wills, and creating a legacy. And this is where we put in the stewardship piece of planned giving for the congregation. That was worked into legacy work, which is so important of where is the legacy we're creating with our lives? What do we want to live beyond us? What has mattered most to us? And part of that is our financial assets and where they go, the things we've worked so hard to accumulate over our entire lives, and where do we want them to go after we're no longer here? In session 4, we called Dying as a Spiritual Event. And this was a really packed presentation. It connected life and death. We invited people in a reflection where they imagined their own death and how they hoped it would go. What was your ideal death? Thoughts on the afterlife, grief, re-envisioning hope, because this is heavy work and we have to reconnect with the hope here. And finding peace. What does it mean to find peace, knowing that we and everyone we know and love is mortal? So what happened when we did this? We didn't know. This was entirely an experiment. So that first session, we did some advertisements, lots of announcements from the pulpits and newsletter inserts and inviting people on Facebook and all that sort of thing. And about 20 people showed up to the first session, and I was really happy about that. Like, wow, 20 people showed up to talk about death and dying. That's pretty good. And we had a great first session. And then the next week, we're setting up chairs, and 35 people show up to this one. They just heard about the last session, and they're like, well, this is fantastic. And people are just sort of bringing a friend. And so we're like, okay, we'll grab more chairs, making a larger circle. This is fantastic. Third session happens, and we have 50 people. So we're getting 2 circles now, and we're thinking, okay, maybe we need to bring this out into 2 rooms. We're all able to stay in the same room, so that's great. And in that session, we found that people have brought their parents. They've brought their kids. People are inviting their families into this conversation because it's been enriching them, and they know how important it is, and they want some help and a safe space to have these conversations with their loved ones, and we've already been providing it. last session, we get almost 70 people to come talk about this. And it's wonderful and full, and we have a good portion of the people who were there at that service that day have stayed. And people are emailing me, and they're emailing the senior minister, and they're saying, I couldn't come to this one, but I so wanted to be there, and I was at, 2, or I was at 1 and 3, and people were so hungry for this information. And that's what we really discovered here, is people were hungry to have these conversations. It was life-changing, and they really just, more than anything, wanted to have a safe space to have these conversations in. So these are the takeaways. Adults of all ages want to talk about death and dying, and they want a safe space to do it in. And I really see a vital aspect of our ministry is to provide these safe spaces to do that in. And people are very willing to talk about legacy gifts and planned gifts in these safe spaces when they're already talking about the mortality. So linking stewardship to our legacies is natural. Talking about generosity and what our lives mean is natural. So putting these things together is the right thing to do. I've put some resources up here for you to learn more about how you can... Yeah, I like that picture a lot. More ways that you can learn about how to create your own safe space like this. There's the UUA recently, through their Tapestry of Faith, published a new curriculum called Facing Death with Life, and it's wonderful, and it has lots of great ideas on how to do this. You can learn more about planned giving and the resources the UUA provides at uualegacy.org. The Conversation Project is a wonderful way to learn more about how to have these conversations with people you love, and will also give you great ideas about how to do this in your congregation. And there's deathcafe.com again, and they're fantastic, and it's a really fun website, actually. I recommend it. People taking their pictures? They're good? Thank you.
Well, what a great team. Aren't they great? These are my colleagues. I'm so fortunate to get to work with them, some of my colleagues. So I just have a few more words, and then we'll open it up for some questions or sharing if you'd like to. I really love how Laura speaks about the trifecta of sex and death and money. And right. And talking about money, I believe, is so similar to talking about death, in that our avoiding conversations about money creates so much unhealth in our personal lives, in our individual lives, and in our communities. When I made the decision to leave my wonderful congregation that I loved dearly in Fairfax, Virginia, and moved to the hi there, Fairfax, and moved to the UUA and take on this job, it was not uncommon for people to respond by saying, "You're going to what? Why would you do that?" And it broke my heart a little bit, because and hopefully once they thought about it, they really saw it. Because for me, the very heart of ministry is about coming into community and helping each other discover our greatest gifts and our dearest hopes, and bringing those together in a way that creates transformation in our world. And that is the work I'm so happy to do, is to work with congregations and individuals about their gifts. And now it's a somewhat narrower understanding of that. Our resources are gifts we have to share. And then to consider what are our dearest hopes for the world, and to imagine the impact that we can have. I think that's really the heart of ministry. And you may also know this. You all are on this team, right? You get it. You want to raise money. You know this is important. You don't think it's icky, right? Yes. That response, and so you probably heard this too in congregations. You're asking for money again? And I love to answer that question. Yes, we have another wonderful dream. And if you are inspired by this dream, we hope you'll participate with financial support. In the congregation in Fairfax, actually, we started dealing with this by publishing a schedule at the beginning of the year because we had lots of extra ways people could give each year. Lots and lots and lots. And the congregation was giving 10% above their budget. They were tithing to the UUA through APF and to social justice work in the larger community. So 10% beyond their own ministry. And so we would publish this list at the beginning of the year and say, these are our gifts to you, opportunities to give. And we want you to think about it. And we're not expecting you to give to every time we ask. But we hope that you will be so inspired by some of these dreams that you'll want to participate. The joy piece is such an important part of this, and that's why I love this presentation, because I think these ideas really remind us that there's lots of joy in coming together, doing something fun, and then the end result being we are making our dreams come through by sharing what we have to share. And the last thing I want to share, some of you have already heard, but it's a very concrete idea, flash idea, very concrete, and we're not even saying you go do this, we're saying we're going to help you do this. So if you were in the general session late this morning, you heard Jim Key announce that we have received a $5 million grant from our congregation at Shelter Rock to help us with a Legacy Challenge campaign. What we're going to do, so this is how it works, right? Laura, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but people said, oh, yeah, I've been meaning to do that. I'll get around to that on planned giving, right? I'll do that sometime. Well, we're going to offer an incentive, a cash match incentive for people making planned gifts. It's not ready yet. We received news of the grant the 1st of June. So we are just spinning and trying to pull all of this together. Laura and I in particular are working hard with our partners at the Service Committee, CLF, the UU Ministers Association, and Meadville and Stark King. The 6 institutions are working together, and we're going to do a quiet phase to this campaign this year and then launch it, I think, next year at GA. And there are 3 benefits to your congregation for this. The first, I think, is the most important, honestly, is that we're going to get this conversation really going. We're going to try to talk to every single Unitarian Universalist about their legacy. What is the legacy you want to leave? And hopefully it will be a well-rounded conversation that will include financial legacy. The second benefit to your congregation is that we are going to be developing materials to be used for your own planned giving. So we're going to be hiring this summer a coordinator for this campaign, doing webinars, conference calls, have packets. Laura actually is already engaged, I shouldn't say this out loud, with some congregations to do workshops. She's only one person, but this is part of the work she does, and she's wonderful at it. And so we're going to do a few pilots this year with the congregations that Laura is visiting and involve them and learn about that. And so through that, fine-tune these resources. So that's the second benefit to you. And finally, the gifts that are eligible, the gifts that qualify will be eligible for up to a 10% match. So if someone makes a $50,000 contribution and say they're making half of that to your congregation and half of it to the service committee, then the match for that will be $5,000, and your congregation will get $2,500 in cash. And the UUSC will get $2,500 in cash. Cash now, cash later, enlightened, healthy conversations about legacy, resources, all you need. We're so excited about this. We're setting a goal of $50 million in gifts, in planned gifts, for our association's future, and I hope you're going to want to participate with us. So more details later, but thanks to Shelter Rock. So we have 20 minutes left. We were hoping to have some give and take. Some of you may have somewhere else you'd like to be. That's also fine. But here's our microphone. If you have a question, we'd be happy to answer it. Or you may also have your own flash idea. If you do, I'm going to ask you to really keep it as brief as you can. As you see, there's lots to share. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ivan from the Unitarian Universalist Church of the North Hills. I have two questions, one for Laura and one for Amy. Here we are. So in the death cafes, when you got close to the third or the fourth session, did you actually have forms for people to make an endowment pledge or gift or whatever?
Yeah, so when we were providing people with concrete practical tools such as a form for advance directives, there's a MOLST form in the state of Massachusetts that we showed people and explained what it was. And we also gave people bequest language to leave a gift to their congregation. And I'd worked with the Plan Giving Committee before this Death Cafe happened so that material was ready. There was a nice brochure so people would have it right there if they were willing to do that right now, or they could have it with them in the packet of stuff we were giving them so that they could fill it out soon on their own.
And for Amy, you may not be able to answer this, but with the increased pledging that you got, do you think that was because of the model per se, or just because you were talking about pledging all throughout the year?
Thanks, Ivan.
Yeah, I think much more because of the model, because picking me up? Yeah. I think it was much more because of the model, because if you did not choose to expose yourself to the repeated talking sessions, you could avoid it all except for whichever month you went. So I really do think it was the model and the transparency, because you could see where your money is going, you could see what it was we were paying off, and you could see what it was we were dreaming about. So it did inspire people to say, oh, I can get behind that.
Thanks, Amy.
I'm Jan Garbuski from the First UU Church of San Diego, and we are just starting a bed and breakfast. I researched over 20 congregations, UU congregations, who have or have had bed and breakfast. And so I have little cards for you. We'll be in the UU World eventually, and we're in the Your Home directory. And the All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. has made over $90,000 this way since 2008, and over $8,000 since January 1st. So go for it.
Thank you. Hi, John.
Hi, I'm John Bosted from Tennessee Valley UU Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it's kind of a two-part question, but they're really one. I think two things, and I think of Mary Catherine first. One, it seems to me that the ask has to reflect our deepest values, and therefore it has to come from the pulpit, not only from the pulpit, but from the pulpit, because that's where meaning and theology comes from, okay? That's one thing. And then secondly, I think you have to talk about, and this is your getting away from the annual pledge drive, you have to talk about it throughout the year. So the bottom line, the practical thing is you don't just have a kickoff pledge sermon, you have several sermons about both faith and giving and also ownership of this beloved community. So do you think that's how?
Well said. I think that's great. And our speaker in the last session really emphasized both of those points, Lisa Greenwood from the Texas Methodist Foundation. And on to the first point, what she said is that there are three factors we have to consider: our resources, our programming, what we do together, and our impact, meaning the why, right? Getting to the why is so hard for us. She said that we spend most of our times talking about resources and programs, and we just kind of skirt around the why, and the why is actually just right at the heart of it. And it's a great point about talking about money year-round, talking about generosity all year, and I'm sure some of you do that really well. Thanks, John.
Hi, my name is Jim Pinkham, and I'm from the First UU Columbus, right here in Columbus. So welcome everybody to Columbus, and I hope you're having a good time here. And first, I just want to say I'm really excited about some of these ideas that you guys are sharing for the creativity behind them. And that kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about was the creativity that we have in each other's congregations or within our congregations. I like to celebrate the auctions as not just a fundraising opportunity where a lot of people think about the dollars and cents and how important that is, because really, obviously, the pledging is kind of where it's at when it comes to the dollar amount. But not to lose sight of the opportunity for connecting members and for the relationships that happen during the year when you have auction events, especially not as much the things, but the events where you may not have listening sessions on topic X currently scheduled, but guess what? Next week there's a dinner and everybody is getting together, and it happens throughout the year. So that's kind of a neat thing. And I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate auctions. And if anyone's afraid of them because they're a lot of work, which they are, there is software available to help make it a little bit easier. I know a little bit about that. Just see me.
So you should say that you have a booth in the exhibit hall.
I don't have a booth.
Oh, you don't
I just have a T-shirt. It's just me. I'm not a company. I wrote this at First UU for our own use. And it was helpful, and now I'm sharing it. So it's modest cost, but it's fun. I love auctions, so talk to me if you want to.
That. Thank you. And I can attest from Fairfax's experience that when we went to adding an online component, there were a number of benefits. One is we could offer more things at a lower cost, and another is we had some real loyal members who it wasn't their thing, but they got to participate online, and Fairfax raises a lot of money in their auction. I think almost a third. Is that right, Barb? About a third of what they raise? Yes. Online. So it's a great tool. So talk to him. Yes.
I had a question about the legacy stuff and the bequeathments because, best case, it'd be like a pretty long lead time. And so how do you keep people engaged that might make one but then stay with it throughout until the completion?
Absolutely. So come get my card and we can talk more about this later. But after people have told you that they've put the congregation in their estate plans, you're going to welcome them into a legacy society or a heritage circle or whatever you decide to call this honorary group of people to recognize them, honor them, have fun events throughout the year, and also to remember the people who pass on.
I had a conversation this week with a colleague of mine who is in a little bit of a tussle with his congregation about knowing what people pledge and the financial information. There are some leaders in congregations who believe it's not appropriate. Again, from our last workshop, our guest said, I believe with all of my heart and all of my head that you must do this, that it's a bad business model, it's not spiritually grounded not to do it. Well, this case that I heard about this week from my dear friend is that somebody made a planned gift, was kept from the minister, and so there was no thank you from the minister, and the gift disappeared, friends. So this is stewardship. That's a big part of what stewardship is.
Wow. I'm Eileen McCulley from the First Unitarian Church of Cleveland. Amy, I'm having a failure of imagination. I have read about this process, this year-round thing, and I just cannot picture people showing up to these meetings that are to talk just about money. So tell me what that looks like. How does that work?
So I've got some pretty exciting folks that are leading the meetings first, who are fairly charismatic. That was part of what we were looking for when we asked them to do this. And, they're saying to you, again, flexibility is the key. So if you get folks who loathe this, hate this, don't want to deal with this, what we're saying to them is, look, come in and hear basically the state of the union of the church. Come in and give us that 10 minutes to tell you, this is your money we're spending. For Pete's sake, you don't cut a hole in the bottom of your wallet and just watch the money drain out. So know where your money is going. So we tell them, come in for that 10 minutes. We'll take a quick coffee break. Run out and get you a cup of coffee, and don't come back if it's really that nerve-wracking. We won't be upset with you. But it's here to inform you, and we will ask you to go ahead and grab your pledge card as you're fleeing out the door in terror and get it back within about 2 weeks. But at least we know you had a chance to ask those questions.
And what kind of attendance did you get, or do you get?
Very good, actually, shockingly. The first 8 months were stronger than the last two because we were very specific. For folks where this was just beyond their interest, beyond their ability, we put them all in April, which was our traditional pledge month. So if this was just too much to deal with, we put you in April, you came to the April meeting, you picked up a pledge card, went, oh, look, a treasurer's report. And, we're good with that.
Vale has something to add as well.
I just want to jump in to make sure that you all know of another resource that's available to you through our UUA, which is the Wisdom Path curriculum, which we've heard wonderful reviews from congregations who have used it. It leads people through a spiritual exploration of their relationship with money. And it's only a teeny, tiny bit at the very end that helps them to think about linking that theory to generosity toward the congregation. It's really a personal spiritual development tool. And I think this is just one of those muscles that's not super well exercised in our congregations, and we want you to know that this resource is getting great reviews. It's on the website, available all the time to you.
Wisdom with a $sign instead of an S. Path.
I'm Don Parker from First Unitarian Church in Hobart, Indiana, and that actually may have been at least a part of an answer to my question, which I actually intended to ask it in the last session because reference was made to our anxiety over the use of money in our lives, and often there's not as much, we think that there's not as much as we would like there to be for what we want to do. And so there are some of these curricula that have been written with a theistic viewpoint as to the use of money, we've used like modules out of Wisdom Path at our congregation, but I wondered how far down the road it might be helpful for a congregation to go in terms of using some of this stuff that some faiths, some evangelical faiths use, which is more overtly about how you use money, because then that guides your giving. And does Wisdom Path go that deeply? Are we thinking about doing something that's that deep? That was my question.
The Financial Peace University, who's the author of that?
One of them, yes, right.
I can't remember his name. It's an evangelical tool.
Ramsey?
Dave Ramsey, yeah, thank you. So I believe Jan is still here from San Diego. Yeah, so the San Diego congregation adapted that for a Unitarian Universalist perspective. So that's another place that we can all go flocking to get information from the San Diego congregation about how that went. Because that's a, pardon? Oh, I thought someone shouted out a question. That's called Financial Peace University, and that's a big deal among our friends of other faiths. They really ask you to change your life in a group of folks, making decisions about stopping using credit, working yourself completely out of debt. You keep track of everything you're doing, and you have some accountability that's faith-based. And so we I think, would use different language for some of those decisions, but I want to say those exercises are just as valid for us. So I'm glad to be able to let you know about what San Diego did.
Great. Thank you. I just want to give you a time alert. We probably have time for 2 or 3 more questions. Come on and talk fast.
A question about the legacy giving. So we're a small congregation, but have a endowment fund, thanks to one congregant, Elizabeth Morrow, who split it between us and the UUA about 10 years ago. If someone does plan giving, does it have to go into the endowment fund, or can it go to the capital fund? Because we have very strict rules on how the endowment fund is going to be spent, and we're not spending the principal, and we're not spending the principal plus CPI, so if someone wants to see it all spent on something, can...
Yep, and that's a great... So, no, it doesn't all have to go to the endowment. I recommend that all congregations have a gift acceptance policy, which puts some rules in place about where gifts, especially unrestricted bequests that come in, go, so they don't automatically go to the endowment necessarily, and they don't, God forbid, get voted on at an annual meeting by the whole congregation.
so that there's some accountability there. But people can put restrictions on their gifts, and a great reason to promote planned giving in your congregation is so you can have these conversations beforehand, really know why someone has left this gift and what they want the purpose to be.
So it doesn't just show up in their will.
It doesn't just show up in their will. It's not a surprise, and so that the congregation will also be able to meet that gift, and if adjustments need to be made so that it's not just to build an animal shelter in the basement, that it's something different that can be with the spirit of that generosity so that you can meet in the middle.
Thank you for giving us a lot of information. I'm from Miami, Florida. If you notice anything about Miami, there's always something quirky about Florida. I've had an opportunity to attend a Canvas training session, and our small fellowship needed to raise funds. So I came up with the idea of having a $1.98 male beauty pageant. Now, I don't remember how much we raised, enough to send me to a training for Canvas, but I do remember that we had a lot of fun. And I think it's also interesting that Florida has a lot of fun and sun, but a lot of people go there, they don't have a lot of fun. But this is one way which all ages and all whatever can raise a small amount of money.
Thank you. Our last question.
Steve Minerick, Elliott Chapel, Kirkwood, Missouri, had a question. So our local public radio station went from a pledge drive model years ago to more of a sustaining membership model. And so it struck me that has a lot of potential to have some of the benefits Amy was talking about. I'm wondering if any congregations are experimenting with something like that.
We have a number of congregations that are doing multi-year pledges. Some of them build in a small increase each year. Some of them just hold a pledge for 3 years, and then in 3 years there's a new model. Anybody?
Yeah, I would say one way in which I've seen some congregations move to the year-round pledge model that Amy was talking about is that it says very clearly in the materials, this pledge that you're making, we assume that this will be the amount that you will pledge from now on, unless you let us know otherwise. And then, very significantly, 25% of the congregation is targeted every year to with a specific increase request. So, yes, your pledge might be, I don't know, $100,000. I'm just pulling a number out of the air. And then you might receive a mailing that says, we would love to invite you to consider raising your pledge this year to, I don't know, $200,000. And so people know on the front end that they're going to have that opportunity for further conversation, which is so important. And that's a great challenge, even for so many of our pillars who join our congregations, who then don't substantially raise their pledge ever again, even though it's like the center of their lives, this tradition and this congregation. So that's a nice element.
Great. Thank you so much for your presence, your enthusiasm, your interest. I'm closing with words from Annie Dillard. One of the few things I know about writing is this: spend it all, shoot it, play it, lose it, all, right away, every time. Do not hoard what seems good for a later place in the book or for another book. Give it all, give it now. The impulse to save something good for a better place later is the signal to spend it now. Something more will arise for later, something better. These things fill from behind, from beneath, like well water. Similarly, the impulse to keep to yourself what you have learned is not only shameful, it's destructive. Anything you do not give freely and abundantly becomes lost to you. Peace, friends. Thank you for being here.